West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Good evening. We begin tonight with a stunningly simple fact. The former president of the United States has just loudly and proudly confessed to the very thing the House Select Committee is hard at work trying to prove. He has also just dangled pardons in front of the people who attacked the Capitol and leveled veiled threats, hinting at potential mob violence at those who would investigate or prosecute him. Yet that fact that he did all that in just a single weekend, shocking as it is, also comes with a depressingly familiar corollary. It has always been this way. He has always said the quiet part out loud, whether after the fact or before or both. He is, consciously or not, a serial confessor. And yesterday in a statement, he did it again. The once and perhaps future President of the United States said this about former Vice President Mike Pence, quote, "He could have overturned the election." Now that's as clear a statement as you can find of his intent to remain in office by nullifying the results of a free and fair election. He's even using the language "overturn the election," which is the very thing the January 6th committee is trying to prove. Now that statement, if that's what it's called, essentially admitting he attempted to stage a coup, follows remarks in Texas where he said this about members of the violent mob who took part in that very attempt. He's now in jail awaiting trial, charged with destroying property, assaulting police officers, weapons possessions, and even conspiring, in the words of the criminal statute, to overthrow, put out, or to destroy by force the government of the United States.
If I run and if I win, we will treat those people from January 6th fairly. We will treat them fairly. And if it requires pardons, we will give them pardons because they are being treated so unfairly.
So unfairly, he said. That is a former president dangling pardons in front of alleged felons, some of whom might be called on one day to testify against him. Yet, again, shouldn't be that surprising. He's done it openly before and paid no price for it. Back in 2018, when he refused to rule out pardoning his corrupt former campaign advisor, Paul Manafort.
I think the whole Manafort trial is very sad when you look at what's going on there. I think it's a very sad day for our country. He worked for me for a very short period of time, but you know what? He happens to be a very good person. And I think it's very sad what they've done to Paul Manafort.
He would, of course, go on to pardon Paul Manafort and Roger Stone, neither of whom, in his words, or Tony Soprano's, ever flipped on him. So what he said on Saturday shouldn't be surprising. The behavior and intent were out in the open years before, as was, going back to his first campaign, his intention to let a foreign power hack American computers and tamper with American democracy.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Well, 5 hours later, according to the Mueller report, the Russian hacking began. His subsequent explanation to the special counsel's team was that it was a joke, quote, as was apparent to any objective observer. Now, you would think this was perhaps his first lesson in how easy it would be for him to say the quiet part out loud and not face any consequences, except in truth it wasn't. 6 months earlier, in what was, for him at least, a surprisingly self-aware and maybe meta observation, he said this.
I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay?
Now, in this case, thank goodness he was speaking figuratively, which of course later gave rise to his handlers and enablers telling us, oh, we should take the man seriously, not literally. Except, as it would happen, the best way to predict what he would do or how he felt about something or explain it after the fact would be to take what he said literally. Want to know if he had a soft spot for white nationalists? Take him literally.
You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Now, to remind you, this was one of the two sides he was talking about, white nationalists chanting "Jews will not replace us" and the Nazi slogan "Blood and Soil." And you didn't need to read behind or between the lines to see where his sympathies lay. You just needed to take his words at face value. And if there were any doubt at the time about his affinity for thugs, you could take what he said in March of 2019 at face value when he boasted about the bikers who supported him, saying, quote, "I have the tough people, but they don't play it tough until they go to a certain point, and then it would be very bad, very bad." Nobody took that seriously enough at the time, nor did many take these remarks in front of tens of millions of debate viewers seriously enough or see them as the foreshadowing they were of January 6th.
Would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and Proud
Boys, stand back and stand by.
Again, there they are. Words that the former president's enablers did not take either seriously or literally, even though the Proud Boys certainly seemed to. And again, they too were part of a pattern dating back to then-candidate Trump refusing to denounce former KKK leader David Duke when pressed repeatedly on it by CNN Jake Tapper. He subsequently blamed it on a bad earpiece, but it would foreshadow his reluctance, of course, to condemn the haters in Charlottesville. Senator Marco Rubio, his primary opponent at the time, did condemn him for that, but then, of course, went on to become one of his staunch supporters and enablers. That was nearly 6 years ago. Countless indictments of associates ago, 2 impeachments and 1 insurrection ago, and so very much of it was openly telegraphed or openly admitted to after the fact. And even now, even someone who voted to convict him in his second impeachment and who condemns his pledge to pardon January 6 criminals still cannot completely rule out supporting him in 2024.
Well, we're a long ways from 2024, but let me say this. I do not think that President Trump should have made that pledge to do pardons. We should let the judicial process proceed.
You say we're a long way away
January 6th was a dark day in our history.
And it was, and you voted to convict President Trump as well. Why can't you rule out supporting him in 2024?
Well, certainly it's not likely, given the many other qualified candidates that we have that have expressed interest in running. So it's very unlikely.
So she voted to convict him in proceedings where a conviction would have barred him from ever holding office again, which she was comfortable with when she voted to convict him. Yet somehow, now, she can't simply say out loud what she said with her vote just a year ago. A year that hardly saw the former president mellow. Just the opposite. No, her remarks came just a day after he openly tried to make martyrs and heroes out of the mob that terrorized her own workplace and threatened to hang the man presiding over it. And it's not like that threat is receding. Here's what the man she still might support also said on Saturday about the public servants, sworn officers of the court, who are investigating him.
It really is prosecutorial misconduct at the highest level. These prosecutors are vicious, horrible people. They're racists, and they're very sick. They're mentally sick. If these radical, vicious, racist prosecutors do anything wrong or illegal, I hope we are going to have in this country the biggest protest we have ever had in Washington, D.C., in New York, in Atlanta, and elsewhere, because our country and our elections are corrupt.
So just take a step back when you hear him say that at the end. That's a former president of the United States, just in a sentence saying our country and our elections are corrupt. The former president of the United States is saying our country is corrupt. Our elections are corrupt. Nobody blinks an eye. I mean, can you imagine for a moment if any other president or former president said those words in previous years? There'd be outrage. The president's words encouraging mobs to rally against public servants prompted Atlanta Area District Attorney Fani Willis to ask the FBI for help in providing security for buildings and staff for security assistance. She's investigating the former president's effort to overturn results in Georgia. She's doing her job. Whether it comes to the threat he might pose to her office or democracy, she is taking his words and deeds at face value. Others, sadly, still not so much.
It is Tuesday, the 1st of February of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. You know it always has, and it always will. Okay, well, we got that former guy, I guess they call him the former guy, still making waves. I suppose as long as you report on him, he will continue to make waves, and that's exactly what he needs, and it is exactly what he wants. How do we attend to this without giving him the needed attention that he so requires? Demands, actually. Well, I don't know. We're supposed to be a free country, right? A free country that allows itself to be destroyed from within and turned into a fascist state. How free are we then? I don't like the idea of a third of the country determining that freedom is living under the iron heel of the fascist. I don't like it. Oh, yeah, they got a lot of guns, they got a lot of armaments, but you know what? Maybe it's time to start rounding them up. Is that un-American? Well, I don't know what to do. We are at an impasse. This guy is out there making public proclamations for people to go into the streets, riot, burn down courthouses, because he might be under the aegis of the law. Everything and everyone is corrupt but Donald Trump and his business. Which is actually quite comical on the face of it. Everybody knows how corrupt this guy's been for decades. And we're supposed to pretend it's just okay. They live in a different sort of atmosphere than the rest of us. So much for the idea that rich people are, I don't know, instantly pure of heart. Oh, Joe, another joke on its face. My God. Yeah, I have found out that rich people don't get rich by, being too nice. A rarity, I might add. So here we are. Property and money is king. And those people who have a lot of money, not much interest in maintaining representative democracy because they are stateless. Whatever state allows them to continue doing what they're doing is the state that they will be backing. So as corrupt as our election system is supposed to be, as corrupt as all the Democrats are supposed to be, where's all the big effing money coming from for us? Soros? I wish we'd get more. Where is it? He's supposed to be financing a new world order. Well, I don't know. Is he? I'm still waiting on all that money from the Kruger, when we divested from the Krugerrand. Where's my Soros money? I'll take just the interest. I'm serious. I might be able to run a small country like Italy, 5th in the world in GDP. I think I'd have enough money for that. which is actually better than Russia. Russia, they talk about Russia and Italy being very similar in their GDP, but actually Italy has a better GDP than Russia. Oh, and that brings to mind something else. The Soviet Union was not Russia. The Soviet Union was the Soviet Union. So any deals brokered with the Soviet Union were not passed on to Russia when the Soviet Union dissolved. So this idea that we're not supposed to expand NATO because we made some kind of agreement with Brezhnev that was never written down has no bearing on the case now, because Russia is a mob government run by a mobster, and they have nothing to do with the Soviet Union. There was no deal brokered with Russia not to expand NATO. Please. I'm tired of this. And it's not Czechoslovakia either, okay? It's Czechia. Slovakia is something totally different now. Times change. Okay, well, where else are we? Where else are we? Well, we're right here is where else we are. The world is crumbling down around us. It feels like it, doesn't it? It would be nice to have the innocence of a child and be able to live amongst the devastation and the impending doom and still have fun because you're a kid. I don't have a care in the world. I'm a kid. Happened, Yeah. Kids playing in the bomb crater after the bombs dropped. They gave it a little bit of time for the smoke to, sort of like subside a bit. But nope. We're old folks now. We've had some bumps and bruises. We know what it feels like. And we don't want to feel like that anymore. I thought Nixon was bad, and he was. But this takes the cake. I mean, our judiciary is stacked with Federalist Society and Heritage Foundation. I would call them insurgents. Decay us from within, take over our judiciary. Now, this stacking of our judiciary by the GOP has been a long-running gambit, much longer than our alliances with Vlad. So I can't really say that Vlad gave the GOP the idea about how to stack the judiciary. I think that's been worked to pretty much of a science here in America. Remember when FDR was accused of stacking the judiciary? Remember that? No, you don't, because none of us are that old, but it is in the history books. And yes, he was taken to task for it. Why? Because you had the Tannies of the world, and that philosophy still prevalent. Oh yeah, 3/5 of a human, that might be too much for them. Property is property, whether you've been labeled a human after all. You're still property in the eyes of the court. Oh, really? Thanks. That's due process. That's elevated thinking. So, yeah, stacking the courts. This effort's been going on for quite a while, and I have to say, way back in Reagan is when it became very evident that they were adopting the Soviet the 50 and 70 year plan. So they didn't have necessarily the stacking of the judiciary in the Soviet plan. But when you make it into American and you're going to make plans for 50 to 70 years in the future and what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, don't let Democratic judges take the court because they might follow the Constitution instead of using our laws against us like all Nazis do. Everything the Nazis did was legal. In fact, it was so legal when they were finally given the go-ahead by the courts to become a full-fledged Nazi state, and anybody who wasn't, well, off to the gulags to you. Concentration camps. Yeah, it was called the Enabling Acts. Everything they did was legal. Everything. But in the eyes of history and in the judgment at Nuremberg, doing your job? No. That's not an excuse. Didn't really know what was going on. That flies in the face of credulity. And actually, when you take anecdotal evidence from folk, kids, or people who were little kids then, and there's still quite a few of those around, they'll tell you, oh yeah, we knew about the concentration camps. We knew what was going on with the Jews. And others, by the way. But 6 million, I believe, is a low number. But that can be proved, factored out. And the idea that the nation, the populace, was naive of what was going on is not true. They were good Germans. And now we have our good Republicans, just like the good Germans. That may not necessarily make you a Nazi, but it does make you a Nazi sympathizer. We have churches completely violating the Constitution. And how is that? Because they're getting tax breaks while pontificating at the pulpit about how to overthrow the United States of America. How are they any different than these ayatollahs, these Islamic clerics, calling for a new empire of Islam, and the infidel must be vanquished and done away with? How is that any different in what's going on with our extreme right-wing white churches? And I'm going to say one other thing about Ted Cruz here. Well, one other thing. It includes Ted Cruz. He considers Joe Biden nominating a black woman to the bench as offensive. Now, I got to say, we've all lived on this earth for quite a while, and we have all been part of representative democracy, and I bet all of us at one point or another walked a precinct and took care about how our democracy would be run. And we know bigotry and racism when we hear it, when we see it, and when it is put in action. Anybody who thinks nominating a black woman to the Supreme Court is offensive is a bigot by definition. And yes, I've heard this argument. He can't be racist. He's Hispanic. Oh, really? Then you don't know what racism is, do you? Anyway, he thinks he's white. Okay. All right. Ted. Okay. What do we have here curated for you on the rest of the show here in this fabulous salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, starting off at the top, yeah, Trump has always said the quiet part out loud. Always. Always. On the rest of the menu, a federal judge rejected a plea agreement for one of the white men convicted of murder for fatally shooting Ahmaud Arbery. The Georgia DA investigating Trump asked the FBI for protective security help. A little bit of intelligence help, too, would be nice. And a trial challenging Florida's new sweeping voting restrictions law has begun. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Twitter filed a lawsuit against Germany's new online hate speech reporting rule. Because they don't want to report hate speech, okay? They're doing so well here. And 13 U.S. states, along with the countries of Antigua, Barbuda, and Belize, are backing Mexico's lawsuit against gun makers. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link across the page, near the bottom of that homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, if you could send those funds to us once a month, it really helps us. And thank you so much to those who have been doing so for so many years. It's been exceedingly helpful, and we want to make sure that that generosity is acknowledged, because it is, and it's been exceedingly helpful. I just got the bill from the hosting company. That bill went up. Ouch. Yeah. So running this little powerhouse of resistance doesn't happen by free. No, we pay. And because we pay our bills, we are somehow able to then fly under the radar and continue this almost 11-year effort to stop the dark forces assaulting representative democracy as we speak. It is ongoing. It's always going to be an issue. Making sure that representative democracy is literally taking care of the ship of state. And you better go out there and rub out all of those barnacles. You got to take a circuit, work your way all the way around, sanding and grinding and polishing. And when you get done, then you got to start all over again. It is a never-ending effort. All right? And, maybe you can have the weekends off. Someone else will fill in for you, because that is still how it works. But anyway, we take our civic duty seriously here, and we appreciate your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended, so many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. The show notes and links, of course, as you know, are the important part, because that's where the real reportage is. Everything else is, we're a salon, and we're discussing now, aren't we? Yes, we are. Okay, and if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. And also, do check out the deep archive of Netroots Radio shows at the Internet Archive. Links provided where we have them. Where are they? Well, we're trying to put them everywhere. Okay. Let us now tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It is out of the Associated Press by Russ Bynum. A federal judge rejected a plea agreement yesterday, Monday, that would have averted a hate crimes trial for the white man convicted of murder for fatally shooting Ahmaud Arbery, whose parents angrily objected to the deal as unfair and unjust, and also they were never consulted. The decision by U.S. District Court Judge Lisa Goodby Wood. Now, once again, how come judges get three names like serial killers? Well, why is that? I don't understand. Is there a coincidence here? I don't know. Anyway, Judge Lisa Goodby Wood came just hours after prosecutors gave notice that son and father, Travis and Greg McMichael, had agreed to plead guilty to hate crime charges that they chased, threatened, and killed 25-year-old Arbery because he was black. But Travis McMichael's sentencing hearing yesterday afternoon turned emotional and contentious as federal prosecutors urged the judge to approve the deal even after Arbery's parents pleaded passionately for her to deny it. Travis McMichael would have received 30 years in federal prison to be served alongside the penalty of life in prison without parole imposed by a state court judge for the murder conviction. By pleading guilty, he would have given up the chance to appeal his federal sentence. But Arbery's family objected to a provision that sought to transfer Travis McMichael immediately to federal custody from state prison. Arbery's parents argued that conditions in federal prison would not be as tough for the McMichaels. Arbery's mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, said she felt strongly that Travis McMichael should serve his entire sentence in a Georgia state prison. Judge Wood said she was rejecting the deal because its terms would have locked her into a specific sentence. She said the Arbery family should have a say at sentencing and whatever punishment is ultimately given. Now, the question is whether Travis McMichael will withdraw the guilty plea he entered yesterday, Monday, and whether Greg McMichael, who had been offered the same deal the judge denied, will still plead guilty as planned. The judge gave them both until Friday, this coming Friday, to return to the federal courthouse in Brunswick and give their answer. The plea deals would likely have forced the McMichaels to spend decades in prison, even if they won appeals in their state convictions. The McMichaels armed themselves and chased Arbery in a pickup truck after they spotted him jogging in their neighborhood outside the port city of Brunswick on February 23rd of 2020. A neighbor, William Rhodey Bryan, joined the chase in his own truck and recorded cell phone video of Travis McMichael blasting Arbery with a shotgun. A national outcry erupted when the graphic video leaked online 2 months later. 2 months later, and it was leaked. Georgia was one of just 4 U.S. states without a hate crimes law at the time. Legislators quickly approved one, but it came too late for state hate crime charges in Arbery's killing. Despite being convicted of murder in Georgia state court last November, the McMichaels and Bryan still face federal hate crimes charges that accuse them of violating Arbery's civil rights and targeting him because he was black. Travis McMichael told the judge in a loud, clear voice that he was willing to plead guilty to killing Arbery out of racial animosity. Prosecutor Tara Lyons asked the judge to set aside the Arbery family's misgivings about the deal, saying Travis McMichael's admission should send a powerful message. Lyons said she understood the Arbery family's anger and distrust of the criminal justice system, but federal prosecutors said they had consulted with attorneys for Arbery's parents before signing off on any deals. Well, why didn't the lawyers talk to the family? Lee Merritt, an attorney for Arbery's mother, said that was misleading. He told reporters outside the courthouse that the family had previously rejected an identical plea deal proposed by prosecutors. The family no longer wanted to engage them concerning that point, lawyer Merritt said. They had had their answer. The federal prosecutors took that as a deferral. Kate Brumback of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The prosecutor who was investigating whether Trump and others broke the law by trying to pressure Georgia officials to overturn Joe Biden's presidential election victory is asking the FBI for security help after Trump railed against prosecutors investigating him. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis wrote a letter to the FBI office in Atlanta asking for a risk assessment of the county courthouse, where her office is located, and the government center. She also asked the FBI to provide protective resources, which, quote, include intelligence and federal agents, end quote. At his rally Saturday night outside Houston, Trump lashed out against the ongoing investigations in New York, Georgia, and Washington, and called on his supporters to stage mass protests, meaning, riots, if he is mistreated by them, meaning if he's held to obey the law. That's mistreating Trump. In her letter, Willis quoted comments Trump made at the rally. One of those quotes is, if these radical, vicious, racist prosecutors do anything wrong or illegal, oh, you mean if these black prosecutors, people of color in the judiciary, if they do something illegal, a mobster is saying that the lawmen and women tasked with making sure this criminal is held to account? All right, you know what he said. Now, the comments were particularly notable given Trump's role in inciting the January 6, 2021 storming of the Capitol building. Trump also suggested he might pardon those charged for their role in the riot, you mean the insurrection, if he runs for president again and wins re-election. Willis last year opened an investigation into any potential attempts to improperly influence the 2020 general election in Georgia by Trump and his associates. A special grand jury is set to be seated on May 2nd to aid in that investigation, and Willis asked the FBI to take the steps she requested well in advance of that date. My staff and I will not be influenced or intimidated by anyone as this investigation moves forward, Willis wrote. She added that her office had already taken steps to address security concerns, considering the communications we have received from persons unhappy with our commitment to fulfill our duties. She said she's also working with county officials on the need for extra security measures as the investigation progresses. Anthony Izaguirre of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A trial challenging Florida's new voting restrictions began yesterday, Monday, with civil rights groups moving to block the sweeping Republican election law as an unnecessary burden on the right to cast ballots. Chief U.S. District Judge Mark E. Walker is hearing the case, which combines a flurry of lawsuits from advocacy groups that sued shortly after DeSantis signed the bill last spring, proclaiming he was securing election integrity. In other words, he's furthering the big lie. The start of the trial marked another chapter in the national debate over voting rights, following a wave of state GOP bills that tightened access to mail and early balloting as Republicans cling to Trump's false claims of fraud in the 2020 election. In Florida, DeSantis supported the new restrictions even while maintaining that the state carried out an unblemished election in 2020. Still, as he runs for re-election and eyes a possible 2024 presidential run, DeSantis has cited unspecified instances of voter fraud as reason to create a law enforcement agency to investigate election crimes, underscoring the lingering influence of Trump's fraud claims on the Republican base. Florida's law forbids ballot drop boxes from being used outside of early voting hours and requires election supervisors to assign an employee to watch the drop box or face a $25,000 fine. It also requires a driver's license number, state ID number, or last four digits of a Social Security number to request a mail ballot. A request for a mail ballot is only valid for the next general election rather than 2 general election cycles under another of the law's many provisions. Supporters of the law argue the changes were necessary to preserve election integrity. Now, during the hearing, Cecil Schoon, president of the League of Women Voters of Florida, told the judge that the law needlessly dissuades voters from casting ballots after an election in which people heavily used mail voting without issue. It just puts limitations on ways to vote for fears of things that are not happening, she said. Nationally, Democrats have failed to unite behind federal voting rights legislation. Excuse me. We have been united. We have 2 senators who decided that they didn't want to be part of it. Boy. All right. Well, the most recent push collapsed in January when Democrats could not persuade Sinema and Manchin to change the Senate procedures on a voting package and allow a simple majority to advance it. The Florida trial is expected to last 2 weeks, though Judge Walker signaled it could go much longer. Well, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. As it happens, tiger sharks have something in common with certain East Coasters.
During the winter when it's cold, they kind of snowbird down near the Bahamas and off of Florida. And then during the summer, they migrate north.
Neil Hammerschlag is director of the Shark Research and Conservation Program at the University of Miami. He and his colleagues analyzed 40 years of fishing catch data, and they found that as ocean waters have warmed, the shark's range has shifted some 250 miles to the north. The sharks, it seems, are chasing their preferred water temperatures toward the pole. They also tracked dozens of tiger sharks with satellite tags for 9 years, and they found similar results.
So taken together, we have several lines of evidence that tiger shark distributions and their migrations are changing from ocean warming, causing their distributions and migrations to extend and expand further north. And in these northern areas, they actually occur earlier in the year from ocean warming.
Their findings appear in the journal Global Change Biology. This shift matters, Hammerschlag says, because tiger sharks are apex predators, and where they go influences the food web beneath them. The sharks are also moving outside marine protected areas and into places where they could be more vulnerable to commercial fishing.
What this points to is that these marine protected areas need to consider current but also future changes in species distributions from ocean warming. And they certainly have to be adaptive and maybe, work with not only having marine protected areas, but also other types of protections like catch limits and other types of more traditional species conservation and management tools in addition to protecting places.
Now, if you don't find the ecological argument convincing, Hammerschlag pointed out one more implication. Although shark bites are relatively rare, he says, if tiger sharks shift their range and warm waters draw more bathers to the ocean, that could up the odds of an unfortunate encounter beneath the waves. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
You are listening to 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The battles of Lexington and Concord began the war between America and Britain. In August 1775, Britain declared the colonies to be in a state of rebellion. In November 1775, the king formally withdrew his protection. That winter, Thomas Paine's pamphlet, Common Sense, turned colonial opinion toward the idea of independence. And by the spring of 1776, it appeared to many that independence was the only solution to the colonists' problems. On June 7, 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia introduced a resolution in the Continental Congress asserting that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is, and ought to be, totally dissolved. The Congress appointed a committee of 5 to prepare a declaration of independence. That's all for today's episode. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
At the Supreme Court, what's the shadow docket? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Mention the Supreme Court and you probably envision a deliberative, thoughtful process that begins with the list of cases that the justices will decide that term. It's docket. Cases thoroughly litigated, for example, after a federal district court trial and lengthy review by a court of appeals, followed by extensive briefing and oral argument at the high court itself, and then an opinion with all votes and reasoning publicly disclosed. It's a process designed to appear thoughtful and transparent. In a word, judicial. But now, with increasing frequency, the court is plucking cases for decision from its shadow docket, which operates differently from what we've just described. Although a mechanism for dealing with emergencies has existed since the court's inception, this court's shadow docket is different. Cases on the shadow docket have not had the same deliberative process, and the shadow docket is being used more frequently and consequentially for decisions on, for example, the death penalty, abortion, immigration, and COVID-19 safety restrictions. The shadow docket cases can be a rush to judgment that ends in a decision a sentence or two long with no name of any justice attached. The Supreme Court's extensive use of the shadow docket is problematic because it undermines the public's faith in the court at a time in its and the country's history when the court needs to be seen as operating in the sunshine and not in the shadows. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913, marking the first day of the Paterson, New Jersey silk weavers' strike. During the strike, more than 20,000 silk weavers walked off the job. The strike started at the Doherty Silk Mill, where after years of declining wages, poor working conditions, and long work days, workers had endured the final straw, as management doubled the number of weaving looms handled by each worker from 2 to 4. The silk weavers decided to strike in protest. Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, an organizer from the International Workers of the World, came to Paterson to help with the strike. Soon, ribbon makers, silk dryers, and other weavers joined the effort for improved working conditions. Demands quickly expanded to include the 8-hour day. Immigrant workers from 9 different countries participated in the action, which shut down nearly 300 silk mills in the city of Paterson. The strike lasted more than 5 months. More than 1,800 workers were arrested. Eventually, the strike was broken by management, with the workers gaining few concessions. During the strike, workers were forbidden from meeting in the city of Paterson by city officials. So the mayor of nearby Haledon invited the workers to meet in his town instead. Pietro Botto, an Italian weaver, had sympathy for the strikers, many of whom were Italian. He and his wife Maria offered his home as a meeting place. Huge crowds came to hear speakers such as Upton Sinclair and Elizabeth Gurley Flynn give speeches from the second-floor balcony of the Botto home. Today, the Victorian-style Botto home is the site of the American Labor Museum. You can visit the museum to learn more about the Paterson Silk Strike and about other important events in American labor history by visiting their website, www.labormuseum.net. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 22 degrees Fahrenheit under partly cloudy conditions. A mix of cloud and suns throughout the day. Winds will be light and variable. Highs in the low to mid 40s, partly cloudy skies tonight, with lows in the low to mid 20s. Winds light and variable, partly cloudy skies tomorrow will give way to cloudy skies during the afternoon, with highs in the mid 40s, winds remaining light and variable. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon continue to rise. We now stand at 382,044 confirmed cases, and our deceased have risen as well and now stand at 433. Pollen is rated as none outside the window in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is good at 28 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.44 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 58 and partly cloudy. Paris is 50 degrees and cloudy. Rome is 56 and fair. Kyiv is 30 and cloudy. Kabul is 28 degrees and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 54 and cloudy. Tokyo is 40 degrees and clear. Sydney, Australia is 75 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 45 degrees and sunny. And New York is 31 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Anonymous staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Twitter has taken legal action against a rule coming into force in Germany that obliges social media firms to block or delete criminal content quickly and report particularly serious criminal offenses to the police. A German court confirmed yesterday, Monday. The lawsuit filed at the administrative court in Cologne challenges a provision under Germany's expanded anti-hate speech regulations that Twitter says allows user data to be passed to law enforcement before it is clear any crime has been committed. We are concerned that the law provides for a significant encroachment on citizens' fundamental rights, a Twitter spokesperson said. Facebook and Google also filed similar suits in the summer. In particular, Twitter continued, we are concerned that the obligation to proactively share user data with law enforcement forces private companies into the role of prosecutors by reporting users to law enforcement even when there is no illegal behavior. Germany enacted the anti-hate speech law in early 2018, making online social networks YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter responsible for policing and removing toxic content. The law, which also required social networks to publish regular reports on their compliance, was widely criticized as ineffective, and Parliament in May passed legislation to toughen and broaden its application. The new regulation is intended to help German law enforcement better target right-wing extremism and hate speech online, and it looks like Twitter wants to defend that.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Nate Raymond of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. 13 U.S. states and 2 Latin America and Caribbean nations threw their support behind a lawsuit from Mexico that accuses several major U.S. gun makers of facilitating the trafficking of weapons to drug cartels, leading to thousands of deaths. The states and the countries of Antigua and Barbuda and Belize filed separate briefs urging a federal judge in Boston to not dismiss Mexico's $10 billion lawsuit against companies including Smith & Wesson and Strom, Ruger and Company. The companies have argued Mexico has failed to establish its harms were attributable to them and that a U.S. law, the Protection of Law, Commerce, and Arms Act, protected gun makers from lawsuits over their products' misuse. Mexico's lawyers, in a filing, countered that the law only precludes lawsuits over injuries that occur in the U.S. and would not shield the companies from allegations over trafficking of guns to Mexican criminals. District attorneys general from 13 states, including Massachusetts, California, and New York, along with the District of Columbia, agreed, saying even if that law applied extraterritorially, the statute would not bar Mexico's claims. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.